As a football fan, you love to see any time there's a great underdog story, either a David versus Goliath situation or just a successful outcome after a prolonged period of failure. And this year in MLS, Atlanta United gave us an underdog story that realistically has elements of both in their campaign. This year for Atlanta United is going to be one that they never forget for both good and bad reasons. And yes, we're talking about Atlanta United, not Atalanta from Italy, so we are getting an MLS video on the channel. Atlanta's story so far is just too good to ignore. They're a club who at points this season probably felt like hope was just going to be lost, as they sat low in their table and even had to sack their manager. Yet they were able to turn things around and make strides towards where they really want to be at as a club. See, Atlanta United has only been in MLS since 2017, and they came out the gates quicker than Arteta trying to sign another center back. In just their first season, they finished in 4th place in the Eastern Conference under Tata Martino, doing this while also breaking attendance records in MLS, as the people of Atlanta would consistently show out and provide one of the best atmospheres in the league. In 2018, which was just their second year, they'd win the MLS Cup and the Supporter Shield, bringing Atlanta their first championship in a major sport since 1995. And in 2019, they'd make the semifinals, but unfortunately come up just short. However, after all this quick success when they first came into the league, things slowly just kind of fell apart for Atlanta, and it more or less brought us to where they started this campaign, a shell of their former selves looking to recapture the glory and give fans what they really deserve. So with that being said, Atlanta United's determination to really make something happen this season, it really does go a long way. And when you keep in mind the trajectory that they've had this season, there's no telling how much they're going to be able to ride this momentum. And of course, boys, real quick, new to the channel, join the content, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, dropping weekly football videos, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss an upload. And if you're not new to the channel, boys, welcome back, glad to have you around for another video. So with that being said, boys, let's get into Atlanta United's incredible season so far. So really, this campaign can be split into two parts for Atlanta United, before and after the sacking of head coach Gonzalo Pineda. So Pineda kicked off the 2024 season after a somewhat disappointing end to the 2023 season. They did finish in 6th place that year and were close to upsetting 3rd place Columbus in the playoffs, but fell short in a series that they could have really made their own. But Pineda for the 2024 season hoped that Atlanta could put on another season where they could drive for the playoffs and try their best to win the MLS Cup. And then what proceeded to really happen was just a tragedy for Pineda and Atlanta United. So after their first 4 games, Atlanta United had won 2 games and lost 2 games, which had them sitting in 8th place. Not the worst position in the world, considering they still had the entire season to make a good playoff run. And at this point, the alarm bells were not ringing quite yet. But then Pineda would prove to be a variant of Erik ten Hag, as he would go on an 11-game run that saw them win 1 game, draw 4, and lose 6, resulting in Atlanta United sitting in 13th place. The parallels to Ten Hag are actually insane, I'm telling you. To give him a little bit of slack, the problem wasn't entirely his. The squad that Atlanta United have is nowhere near where it was when they won their championship, but at that point they still had the likes of Thiago Almada, Sabalobadinze, Moyumba, and Sliz to work with, so questions had to be asked of the manager. And this period for Atlanta really saw them just playing really unimaginative football and lacked a lot of drive to push into that next gear and really try and win matches that could have swung their way in a different scenario. I will say, however, the one win that they did get there in this period was a 3-1 win over Messi's Inter Miami away from home, which was potentially an omen for events later down the timeline. The final nail in the coffin for Pineda would be a 3-2 loss to Charlotte at home, which would also see Atlanta lose their 5th straight home game. Absolutely inexcusable standards were going on at the club, and once again, I have to say the parallels to Ten Hag are right there. Atlanta United as a club needed to do something as soon as possible if they wanted to salvage the rest of the season, even just a little bit. And since this guy was a variant of Ten Hag, he was gonna suffer the same fate eventually. In an absolute shock to no one, Atlanta United would sack Gonzalo Pineda on June 3rd, 2024. And here the assistant manager Rob Valentino would be taking on the interim manager position for the rest of the season. He had been an interim manager at the club before, but only for 10 games, so now he's gonna have a little bit more time to make an impact at the club while they looked for a long-term solution. And interestingly enough, as they announced the sacking of Pineda, the CEO of the club would release a statement where he's essentially saying that the players are not free from criticism either. Rather, sacking the manager just felt like more of a quick fix, so Pineda being gone did not mean that the players were absolutely safe. But they were hoping that Valentino, whoever came in, would just be able to do something more with this crop of players that they had at their disposal than Pineda was able to. So written into the fabric of the rules of football is that any team who sacked their manager will immediately get the new manager bounce. How long that bounce lasts is different from team to team and situation to situation, but Atlanta United was not an exception to this rule. So once Valentino did take over, Atlanta saw a swing in their results, it saw them improve their results and go on a short 4-game unbeaten run. This would help them go from 13th to 8th place in the league table, which greatly aided them in their hunt for playoffs. However, what greatly offset the new manager bounce that Atlanta had going for them was the departure of their star player, World Cup winning Thiago Almada. Almada is a player who had been key for Atlanta United in his time there. His overall playmaking ability had helped Atlanta so much during a tough period post Tata Martino, but it always felt that a younger player like himself would end up believing at one point or another he wasn't going to be spending his entire career in MLS, and he would eventually make his move on July 3rd as he signed for Botafogo with the understanding that he'd be eventually joining Lyon in January. With Lyon facing relegation now due to being, essentially hundreds of millions in debt, who knows what his future is, but point is, on that day, he left the club, and it definitely hurt Atlanta a ton. They would go on to follow up that really good 4-game period with a very bad 5-game stretch that saw them only win 1 game, draw 1, and lose 3. With things now taking a turn for the worse for the club now that Almada was gone, they knew they had to turn to the transfer market because they couldn't just lose a star player like that and do nothing about it. So on July 29th, they would sign Alexei Miranchuk from Atalanta for 12 million euros. Having some good seasons for a pretty impressive Atalanta side that we've seen in recent years, this transfer proved to be one that paid off incredibly for Atlanta United. So from here, this is where they really had to lock in. Sitting in 9th place with 9 games to go, any wrong move could potentially be catastrophic and drop them out of the playoffs, so they had to make sure that they got as many points as possible. Well, to finish off the regular season, Atlanta United would lose 3 of their 9 matches, but they did get 3 massive wins and 3 important draws that would allow them to finish the season in 9th place, tied on points but just ahead on goal difference. In this result, you had a 2-2 draw against Messi's Inter Miami, where Miranchuk would come up massive with the 84th minute equalizer, a 2-1 win over Charlotte, a 2-1 win over the New York Red Bulls. So this team had really rallied behind the culture of the club as well as Valentino's vision, and you saw by the final game week where they really just secured playoffs how much it really meant to not only the players but Valentino himself. And even though it was 9th place, given how much they had to fight and suffer this entire season to even just get into the playoffs, Atlanta were really in a position where they felt like they had nothing to lose, so they could go into this playoffs and just give it their all. So for the first round of playoffs, Atlanta would have to play against the 8th seed Montreal in a play-in match, meaning whoever wins keeps on going into the playoffs. Montreal had beaten Atlanta twice in the regular season already, and were also led by Atlanta United legend in Josef Martinez, so the writing was on the wall for this to be a tough match for Atlanta. However, like I said, they had nothing to lose, so they came out swinging. By halftime, they would find themselves up 2-0, and all they had to do was maintain the level that they had been at, and they would be into the next round of the playoffs. But see, the thing is, Josef Martinez would turn back the clock a little bit and scored 2 goals in the second half, one of which was an 89th minute penalty, which probably broke Atlantean hearts everywhere. So with the score all level by the end of the match, the victor would have to be decided by penalties, and upsets the guy who has been very instrumental in Atlanta United's playoffs run to date, Brad Guzan. At the age of 40, he would save Montreal's second penalty, and with Atlanta converting all of theirs, they would come out on top and make their way to the next round. So next up for Atlanta United was record-breaking Inter Miami, led by none other than Lionel Messi. So on paper, you would think it's not looking good for Atlanta. You had this Inter Miami side that had just broken MLS records, with Messi, Suarez, Jordi Alba, and Busquets on the side, going up against a 9th seed team who had been deemed lucky just to be where they are. However, if you dig into this matchup on paper just a little bit, you would see that Atlanta have not actually lost to Miami at all this season. And just so we're all aware, this is a best 2 out of 3 series, meaning whoever wins 2 games first, regardless of goal difference, is going to be the team that goes through. MLS is weird, but it is what it is. The first game was played in Miami, and it wasn't the easiest for Atlanta, and if anything, probably just confirmed most people's assumptions of the tie early on. Flowers would put Miami up very early, with Atlanta finding one back before halftime. And despite going into half leveled, it was clear Miami had control of the game. And this would get proven in the second half when Jordi Alba found the go-ahead goal at the 60th minute, and the game would end 2-1. And I do want to say, just for preface, Brad Guzan had 9 saves in this match, which means he prevented 1, of course, not only a ton of goals, but 2, just the dropping of heads from Atlanta players. And they lost this game 5-1, then we'd be talking about a different story. This guy really saved them a ton. So just needing 1 more win, it was time for Miami to go to Atlanta to try and put the series to bed. And it definitely seemed like this would happen as Miami felt comfortable in the first half and would get the opening goal at the 40th minute. So I don't know what Valentino said to his players at halftime, because they came out absolutely ready to leave it all on the pitch. They would get an equalizer at the 58th minute, which made every single person repping Atlanta believe that this game was for the taking. After surviving an onslaught from Miami for 30 minutes, Atlanta would do the unthinkable and found a winning goal at the 94th minute. After so much struggle all season, this goal felt like the encapsulation of all the determination, the grit, the heart that Atlanta had in them to make something something out of this season, winning the match 2-1 and the series being tied 1-1. The series now would go back to Miami to see who would come out on top. And with Miami having won the first match of the series, being undefeated 10 games at home, all signs pointed to an eventual Miami win. But if you learned anything from this video, it's that Atlanta does not care what everyone thinks. The entire game was back and forth as Miami would find the opening goal at the 17th minute, yet Atlanta equalized at the 19th. Atlanta would then find the lead by scoring again shortly after, which saw them going into halftime 2-1. Yet up steps Messi, who scores a header at the 65th minute to equalize the match. But at the 75th minute, after the game did not stop despite a Miami player being on the ground, Atlanta would capitalize on the distracted Miami back line and found a go-ahead goal to make it 3-2. From here, Atlanta would resiliently get through the rest of the game and come out as victors. They had done it. A team who at one point was 13th, sacked their manager, lost their best player, had pushed hard to finish in the playoffs at the 9th seed, had just bounced out the best team in MLS in the playoffs, and was gonna be making their way to the next round. You have to love it. Atlanta United isn't the best team in the world. They have good history since they've come into the league, but what they've shown this season is that they're gonna be a team that regardless of what their situation is, who they're going up against, they're gonna always be giving it their all. Like I just mentioned, a team with determination, with grit, with that passion, and that's something you love to see. Whether they go on to win the entire MLS Cup this season is yet to be seen, of course, but we cannot ignore the season that they've had so far. From 9th seed to beating the best team in MLS, it's absolutely incredible. It's a story you just cannot ignore, people. You can't. So all props to Atlanta United. They're absolutely incredible. I hope they can win it all after this story, and they have to do it for young Thug coming home.